The galaxy had never seen anything like it. A time of peace, a time of cooperation, a time where different species from across the stars came together in the Galactic Alliance. For years, humans had played a pivotal role in this grand coalition, their technological advancements and ingenuity admired by all. Earth, once a backwater planet, had risen to a place of respect in the galactic community. But now, that peace was shattered. It all started with the Zygrax, an aggressive alien empire that had begun to carve its way through the galaxy with fire and blood. Their fleets, vast and terrifying, swept across neighboring star systems with the speed and precision of a well-oiled machine. In response, the Galactic Alliance called for a unified defense and humanity stood ready. But no one could have predicted what would happen next. The Corithians were supposed to be humanity's allies in this war. A peaceful race, known for their advanced technology and unmatched tactical brilliance, they were once the most trusted partners in the Alliance. Together with humanity, they were meant to stand against the Zygrax and protect the weaker races of the galaxy. They had promised to fight alongside humanity, to ensure that no one would be left behind. But then, in the middle of a major skirmish near the Galathor system, the unthinkable happened. Without warning, the Corithian fleet turned around and retreated, leaving the human colonies and ships wide open to the advancing Zygrax. The message was broadcast across the galaxy. The Corithians have withdrawn to preserve their own people. The Zygrax are too strong to defeat. Humanity's leaders were stunned, and for a moment the galaxy seemed to fall silent. The Corithians, who had sworn to stand by their allies, had fled, leaving humanity to fend for itself. This betrayal was not just a failure of strategy, it was a slap in the face. The human colonies scattered across the galaxy, which had depended on the Corithians for protection, now found themselves at the mercy of the Zygrax. On Earth, panic spread quickly. News stations across the planet broadcasted the retreat of the Corithians in disbelief. People were frightened, unsure of what would come next. Was this the end of their civilization? Were they going to be left to fight alone against the overwhelming might of the Zygrax? In the midst of this chaos, one thing became clear. Humanity would not give up. They had been betrayed, yes, but they would not surrender. Not now, not ever. Inside the war rooms of Earth's United Military Command, the leaders gathered. The room was tense, filled with generals, admirals, and strategists from all corners of the planet. The holographic displays flickered with data about the Zygrax, the Corithian retreat, and the state of human defenses. "We cannot let this stand." General Maria Yelena spoke firmly, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. She was one of Earth's most respected military leaders, known for her calm under pressure and sharp tactical mind. "The Corithians may have abandoned us, but that does not mean we will fall." "Agreed," Admiral John Lentz added. "We've faced challenges before, this is no different." But despite the shared resolve, the question hung in the air. What now? The situation was dire. The human fleet, although powerful, was outnumbered. The Zygrax had already overrun several outer colonies and were moving swiftly toward Earth. Their ships were massive and well-armed, their soldiers ruthless. Humanity had fought many wars before, but nothing like this. It seemed impossible to win, but General Yelena wasn't the type to give in to despair. "We have one option," she said after a long pause. "We fight. We fight with everything we have." She turned toward the tactical display. "Deploy every ship we have. Send our fleet to the Galathor system. We may be outnumbered, but we will show the galaxy that humanity will never back down." For a moment the room was still, everyone processing her words. The stakes were higher than ever. If humanity couldn't hold this line, they would lose everything. Earth, their colonies, and their way of life. But General Yelena's plan was clear. They would use every advantage they had, no matter how slim, to strike back at the Zygrax. Admiral Lentz nodded in agreement. "Prepare the fleet. We leave within the hour." The human fleet, though small in comparison to the mighty Zygrax armada, had something that the Zygrax didn't. Heart. Humans had always been known for their resilience, their refusal to give up no matter the odds, and now they would need that more than ever. Meanwhile, on Earth, The news was spreading like wildfire. The betrayal of the Corinthians was everywhere, but so was the call to arms. The people of Earth, the ones who would fight in the trenches in the stars, were rising to the challenge. This was not just a battle for survival. It was a battle for honor, for justice, for everything they had worked to build. In the factories, workers rallied to produce more weapons and ships. In the cities, military recruitment centers swelled with volunteers eager to join the fight. Every person on Earth, from the youngest child to the oldest veteran, was preparing in their own way. Some trained in combat, others worked to provide supplies. But everyone was united by one goal: to ensure that the galaxy would remember what happened when humanity was betrayed. As the preparations moved forward, a message was sent across the galaxy, broadcast to every corner of space. The humans were not going to flee. They were not going to hide. The galaxy had underestimated them before, but now it would learn the true strength of humanity. "We may be few in number, but we are fierce," the message began, spoken by General Yelena herself. "You may have abandoned us, but we will stand. And when we fight with fire and fury." This part sets the stage for the conflict, showcasing humanity's defiance and determination in the face of betrayal. It introduces key characters like General Yelena and Admiral Lentz, emphasizing the gravity of the situation while highlighting the human spirit that will drive the resistance. The tone is set for an epic struggle ahead, one where humanity will show the galaxy what they're truly capable of. The silence was deafening as humanity's leaders came to grips with the reality of their situation. The Galactic Alliance, once a symbol of unity and strength, had fractured. The Corinthians, the allies humanity had trusted, had left them to face the Zygrax alone. The galaxy was watching, but humanity had only one choice: they would fight back. The human military command center on Earth was buzzing with activity. The room was filled with the sound of screens flickering and the hurried footsteps of officers racing to prepare their fleet for war. General Maria Yelena stood at the head of the table, her expression resolute as she studied the tactical map displayed before her. The Zygrax fleet, a terrifying sight of vast warships and battle-hardened soldiers, was moving quickly toward the Sol system. The clock was ticking and humanity's time to act was running out. "We don't have the luxury of time," General Yelena spoke, her voice calm but firm. "We need to hit them hard and fast. Every moment we waste gives them more time to reinforce." Admiral John Lentz, standing beside her, nodded. "We've already mobilized the fleet. The shipyards are working at full capacity. But General, we are still outnumbered. Even with the Iridian's technology, we'll be facing a tough battle." "I know," Yelena replied, her eyes narrowing. "But we will not run. We will not hide. We will fight for every inch of our territory." The room fell silent as the human leaders took in her words. In every corner of the galaxy, the Zygrax had been spreading fear, burning worlds, and conquering civilizations without mercy. Now they had turned their attention to Earth. Yet humanity, once dismissed as weak, now stood ready to prove everyone wrong. For a moment, Yelena's thoughts drifted back to the time before the war, when Earth had been just one of many planets in a vast galaxy. Humans had always been seen as newcomers, inexperienced compared to the older civilizations. But in recent years, humanity had grown stronger, their military might more advanced, their scientists more brilliant. Now, in the face of betrayal, humanity would rely on everything they had learned. "We will fight them with everything we've got," Yelena said finally, turning back to the holographic display. "We'll use their own tactics against them. They might have more ships, but we have something they can't match." "What's that, General?" one of the officers asked. "Human ingenuity," she said with a small smile. "We've fought battles that others thought impossible. This will be no different." As the military leaders prepared, news of the betrayal began to spread across Earth. The global media outlets were flooded with updates, and the people of Earth were left in shock. Many couldn't believe that their allies had turned their backs on them. But there was no time for anger or fear. Humanity had to act. In every city on Earth, people gathered in front of screens waiting for the latest update. The streets were filled with volunteers rushing to recruitment centers, eager to enlist and defend their home. Farmers, teachers, engineers. Every human was doing their part. Some joined the military, others worked to build weapons, ships, and medical supplies. There was a unified sense of purpose, a collective resolve to fight. A young woman, Rachel Thorne, sat at her desk in her small apartment in New York City. She watched the broadcast on her screen, listening to General Yelena's words. The general's message was one of defiance, but also hope. It was a call to arms, and it stirred something deep within Rachel. She had always dreamed of flying in space, of joining the human fleet and defending her home. But the thought of war had always been distant. Now, with the Zygrax at their door, that war had come to her doorstep. The betrayal of the Corinthians hit her hard. She had friends who lived on the outer colonies that were now under siege. Without thinking, Rachel stood up and grabbed her jacket. She knew what she had to do. There was no more waiting, no more wondering if someone else would fight. She had to act. Across the ocean in London, a man named Samuel Harris, a retired soldier, sat in his small apartment, listening to the news. He had served in the Earth military years ago, but had left to live a quieter life. The betrayal of the Corinthians hit him hard. The idea of Earth fighting alone was a bitter pill to swallow. But Samuel knew one thing for certain. Earth had always fought for its survival, and he wasn't about to let it fall now. Samuel picked up his old military jacket from the back of a chair, his fingers brushing over the insignia. The memory of a battle, of standing shoulder to shoulder with his comrades, came flooding back. He had seen the horrors of war, but he had also seen the strength of humanity, the strength to keep fighting no matter what. He opened his door and walked into the streets. As he passed by the crowded recruitment centers, he saw the determination in the eyes of the younger generation. They had been called to fight, and they would answer. Samuel knew that he had to be there with them, to teach them what he knew, to show them that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its weapons or technology, it was in its will to survive. Meanwhile, in the vast reaches of space, the human fleet was being readied. Spaceports around the Earth were bustling with activity as ships were prepared for the coming battle. The Iridians, the secretive alien species who had once been neutral, had offered their help. Their advanced technology was a valuable asset, allowing the humans to upgrade their fleet in ways they never could have done alone. One of the new additions to the human fleet was the Victory, a massive battleship built from the combined efforts of human engineers and Iridian designers. The Victory was armed with the most advanced energy weapons humanity had ever seen, and it would be the spearhead of the human counterattack. Its captain, Marcus Flynn, was a seasoned war hero who had fought in countless skirmishes, but he knew that this fight would be unlike any other. Captain Flynn stood on the bridge of the Victory, staring out at the dark expanse of space. The weight of the moment hung over him, but he was not afraid. This was humanity's chance to prove its strength, to show the galaxy that even in the darkest hour, humans would stand tall. And, as General Yelena had said, they would fight with fire and fury. "We're ready, Captain," a voice called from behind him. It was his communications officer. Flynn turned and nodded. "All ships are to follow our lead. We take the fight to the Zygrax. No retreat, no surrender." The countdown began, and the human fleet, now a powerful force in its own right, moved out from Earth's orbit. The galaxy would soon learn the true meaning of defiance. The Zygrax, who had once seen humans as insignificant, were about to witness the fury of a species backed into a corner. Humanity had been abandoned, but they were not alone. They had themselves. They had their will to fight, their determination to survive. And that was all they needed. The first battle was about to begin, and humanity's answer to the Zygrax was clear. They would not go quietly into the night. They would fight until the last breath. This part builds on the themes of defiance and unity, showing how humanity, after the betrayal, rises up and prepares for the coming conflict. The story focuses on different characters like Rachel, Samuel, and Captain Flynn, who represent the strength of the human spirit and the drive to protect what they hold dear. It highlights the human response to betrayal and the determination to fight back with everything they have. The morning sun rose over Earth, but it felt different today. It was as though the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. Across the globe, people were preparing in their own way for the fight ahead. There was no escaping the reality that war was coming. But there was also an undeniable strength in the air. Humanity had been betrayed by their allies, left to face the Zygrax alone, but they would not break. In every city, in every corner of Earth, the spirit of resistance burned brighter than ever. News broadcasts ran stories of volunteers flocking to military recruitment centers, of factories working at full capacity to produce weapons, and of people standing side by side, united in their determination. Humanity was not known for surrendering. This was their time to prove it. General Maria Yelena stood in front of a large window at the command center, watching the fleet as it prepared to depart Earth's orbit. The giant warships, including the newly upgraded Victory, were lined up, each one a testament to humanity's ingenuity and resolve. The energy weapons, the reinforced shields, the advanced stealth technology, it was all in place. Yet it wasn't the technology that gave Yelena hope. It was the people. She had seen firsthand the way humans rose to the occasion when everything seemed lost. When the Corinthians fled, leaving humanity to face the Zygrax, many felt despair. But what they had not counted on was the unwavering strength of the human spirit. "We can do this," she whispered to herself, then turned toward her officers. "Prepare for launch." In a small apartment in New York City, Rachel Thorne stood at her window, looking out at the bustling streets below. The city had always been alive with energy, but today it felt different. There was a sense of urgency in the air. The call to arms had gone out and people were responding. Rachel had grown up hearing stories of humanity's past battles, of how they had always fought against impossible odds and come out victorious. She had always dreamed of being a part of that, of fighting for her home, for her future. But the reality of war was something she hadn't fully understood until now. The Zygrax were no ordinary enemy. They had crushed civilizations across the galaxy, and now they were headed straight for Earth. But Rachel had made her decision. She wasn't going to sit back and wait to be a victim. She would fight. With a determined sigh, she grabbed her jacket and walked out the door. She had no time to waste. There were people to save, and she had a role to play in the war to come. Samuel Harris, the retired soldier, was already on his way to the recruitment center. He had spent years away from the battlefield, living a quiet life. But when he saw the news about the Corinthians' betrayal, something inside him had clicked. It wasn't just the military that needed defending. It was humanity itself. The streets of London were filled with people making their way to enlist. Some young, some old, but all filled with the same determination. Samuel felt the weight of his past training settle over him like a familiar cloak. He had fought in wars before, but this was different. This wasn't just a battle for land or power, this was a fight for survival. At the recruitment center, Samuel was greeted by a young officer, a woman who looked like she hadn't seen much combat, but there was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. "I'm here to sign up," Samuel said, his voice steady. "I've fought before. You'll need every hand you can get." The officer nodded. "We're glad to have you, sir. You'll be stationed on the Victory, the flagship of the human fleet." Samuel's heart quickened. The Victory, the ship that would lead humanity's charge. It was an honor to be part of something that important, but it also carried a heavy weight. He would be fighting, not just for his country, but for everyone. The stakes had never been higher. Meanwhile, Captain Marcus Flynn stood on the bridge of the Victory, watching as the final preparations were made. The crew was ready. The fleet was ready. But the truth weighed heavily on his mind. They were going into battle against an enemy that outnumbered them, that had already taken down entire worlds. The odds were not in their favor, and yet humanity was not a species that shied away from impossible odds. "Captain, we're ready to depart," said Lieutenant Nora Jones, his first officer. Flynn gave a sharp nod. "All ships, form up. We're moving out." As the Victory and the rest of the fleet broke free from Earth's orbit, Captain Flynn's mind raced. This was it. The moment of truth. The fight would be fierce, and many would die. But humanity had already proven time and again that they could take on anything the universe threw their way. They had survived wars, plagues, and even the silent, unfeeling void of space. And now, they would face the Zygrax. All hands, prepare for battle, Flynn said over the intercom. This is what we've trained for. Back on Earth, the people continued their preparations. The factories were turning out ships and weapons faster than ever before. Engineers were working around the clock to refine the new energy weapons that had been developed in secret. The human fleet was small, but it was resourceful, and it would fight with everything it had. At the same time, leaders across the globe were meeting to discuss the next steps. The Corethians had abandoned them, yes, but the Iridians had offered their assistance. While humanity had always been the underdog in galactic politics, now they had an opportunity to prove that they could stand tall on their own. The Iridians had shared advanced technology that would level the playing field. But it wasn't just their technology that would make a difference. It was their hearts. The human spirit was their greatest weapon. No one else in the galaxy fought like humans. They had a fire in their hearts, a burning will to survive that was unmatched, and that fire would fuel their resistance against the Zygrax. As the human fleet approached the edge of the galaxy, heading toward the first major battle, a message from General Yelena was broadcast across all human colonies. We have been betrayed, but we will not be broken. The Zygrax may think they can crush us, but they will find that we are a force like no other. We are humanity. And when we fight with fire and fury. The words echoed through the hearts of every person who heard them. The galaxy had seen humanity as weak, as a species untested by the challenges of space. But now, humanity would show them what they were truly made of. As the first shots were fired, as the human fleet engaged the Zygrax in the darkness of space, it became clear that this war was not just about survival. It was about proving that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, a force that would never give up, never surrender. The galaxy would remember the day humanity fought back. This part continues to highlight the unwavering spirit of humanity as they prepare for the conflict ahead. It focuses on characters like Rachel, Samuel, and Captain Flynn, each contributing to the larger narrative of human resilience and unity. It also builds up the anticipation of the upcoming battle, emphasizing the importance of human determination and the will to survive. The vast expanse of space stretched before humanity's fleet like a silent battlefield. The stars twinkled in the distance, distant and cold. Yet for the men and women aboard the human warships, the stars were no longer distant. They were a reminder of what was at stake, the future of Earth, the survival of their colonies, and the very identity of the human race. The Zygrax were coming, and the time to act had arrived. Captain Marcus Flynn stood on the bridge of the Victory, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy that hovered before him. The Zygrax fleet, enormous and menacing, was advancing toward Earth at full speed. It was only a matter of time before they reached the Sol system, and humanity's first line of defense, their very home, would be under attack. But Captain Flynn was ready. He had been preparing for this moment his entire life. All ships report in, Flynn commanded, his voice calm but firm. Victory reporting, Captain. Ready to engage, Lieutenant Nora Jones replied. All systems operational. On the Dreadnought, reported Commander Aaron Miller from the fleet's second flagship. Ready to fight, Captain, came the response from the rest of the fleet. The human fleet, though smaller than the Zygrax armada, was a force to be reckoned with. Armed with advanced weapons, new shielding technology, and a resolve forged in the fires of betrayal, humanity's fleet was ready to strike. Prepare to jump to hyperdrive, Flynn ordered. We'll catch them off guard. As the ships readied for battle, General Maria Yelena stood in the war room back on Earth, watching the same holographic map. Her hands were clasped behind her back as she observed the unfolding events. The human fleet was moving out, and with it, humanity's first chance to prove its strength. The Corethians might have abandoned them, but now, Humanity would fight alone, and they would fight with everything they had. "General, the fleet is moving into position," an officer reported from the console. Yelena nodded. "Good. Now we wait. Make sure all our ships are on full alert. This will be a long fight." As the human fleet jumped to hyperdrive, the battle began. The vastness of space seemed to swallow them whole, but the Victory and its sister ships shot forward, racing toward the Zygrax fleet. The Zygrax, with their enormous warships, were not prepared for the sudden shift in the tide. Humanity was not going to wait for them to arrive. They were going to meet them head-on. The first strike was swift and decisive. The Victory fired its newly upgraded energy cannons, the blast cutting through the darkness of space like a beam of light. The Zygrax flagship, the Inferno, was the first to feel the full force of humanity's retaliation. The blast struck its hull, sending shockwaves through the massive ship. The Zygrax commander, Zeroth, watched in disbelief as the human fleet opened fire, their energy weapons cutting down enemy ships with deadly precision. "Return fire," Zeroth roared. "Destroy them!" But the Zygrax were not prepared for the speed and agility of humanity's ships. The Victory and its allies danced through the void, evading the Zygrax's retaliatory strikes with ease. Their advanced shielding technology absorbed the incoming fire, while their new weapons tore through the Zygrax lines. On the bridge of the Victory, Captain Flynn stood, watching the chaos unfold. The Zygrax were tough, but they were not invincible. Humanity had a chance to win this fight if they could keep up the pressure. "All ships continue the attack," Flynn ordered. "We push forward, no retreat." Rachel Thorne, now a fighter pilot aboard the Victory, was locked in her cockpit, her hands gripping the controls as the battlefield unfolded before her. She had trained for this moment, but the reality was far different than anything she had imagined. The Zygrax ships were massive, their weapons capable of wiping out entire fleets in seconds. But Rachel had something the Zygrax didn't: the will to fight. "Pilot Thorne, stay sharp." Her commander's voice crackled through her comms. "We need you to clear the path for the energy cannon." "Understood," Rachel replied, her heart pounding in her chest. She checked her weapon systems, then maneuvered her ship toward the front lines. The Zygrax were relentless, but humanity's fighters were faster, more nimble. Rachel's fighters zipped through the stars, weaving between enemy ships and returning fire. She fired her blasters, hitting the Zygrax ships with pinpoint accuracy, causing explosions to rip through their hulls. "Nice shot, Thorne," her wingmate called over the comms. Rachel didn't respond. She was too focused. Every shot, every movement counted. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. Ahead of her, she saw the Zygrax flagship, the Inferno, looming. In the distance, the human fleet had already damaged it, but it was still heavily armed and dangerous. Rachel knew that if they could destroy the Inferno, the Zygrax would be thrown into chaos. "Target the flagship," Rachel said, voice tight with determination. "I'm going in." She pushed the throttle to its maximum, her ship rocketing toward the Inferno. The massive Zygrax warship fired its weapons, but Rachel was too fast. She dodged and weaved, coming in from the rear. With one final burst of speed, she fired her missiles, striking the Inferno's engines. The ship shuddered as explosions tore through its massive frame. The Zygrax flagship was now crippled, but Rachel knew the battle was far from over. Back on Earth, General Yelena watched the battle unfold on the screens before her. The human fleet was making progress, but the Zygrax were far from defeated. They would continue to fight until every human ship was destroyed. "Status report," Yelena asked, her voice steady. "We've sustained some losses, General," an officer replied. "But our fleet is still holding strong. The Zygrax are retreating, but they'll regroup soon. We need to finish them off before they can reinforce." Yelena nodded. "Keep up the pressure, they won't expect another wave." Captain Flynn's voice crackled through the comms. "Victory to all ships. Prepare for the final assault. We finish this now." The human fleet closed in on the remaining Zygrax ships, pushing them to the edge of retreat. The battle had been fierce, but humanity had proven that it could stand its ground. The Victory, battered but still powerful, led the charge, its energy weapons firing one last time. tearing through the last of the Zygrax ships. The Zygrax had underestimated humanity. They thought they could wipe Earth off the map. But humanity's strength was more than just weapons and technology. It was the spirit of its people, the desire to survive, the refusal to back down. As the last Zygrax ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, Captain Flynn breathed a sigh of relief. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. General Yelena stood in front of the command center's holographic display, her gaze fixed on the screen. The first strike had been successful. The Zygrax had been forced to retreat, but she knew this was only the beginning. "We've made our mark today," she said softly, "but the fight is far from over. Humanity has proven we will never be defeated." As the human fleet made its way back to Earth, the message was clear. The Zygrax had attacked the wrong species. Humanity would not be broken. Humanity would fight with fire and fury. This part marks humanity's first major victory in the war, showing their resilience and tactical ingenuity. The battle is intense, and characters like Rachel Thorne and Captain Flynn play crucial roles in the fight. Humanity proves that despite being outnumbered, their spirit and determination are what make them formidable opponents. The story leaves the reader eagerly anticipating the next phase of the conflict. The victory humanity had won in the first battle was short-lived. The Zygrax, despite their retreat, were not a species to stay down for long. The human fleet had dealt them a heavy blow, but the Zygrax were relentless. Their commander, Zaroth, was not one to accept defeat. The time for regrouping had come, and with it, a powerful counterattack was in the works. Back in the command center of Earth's military, General Maria Yelena stood before a massive screen, studying the data. The human fleet had returned to Earth for repairs after the battle, but it wasn't long before reports started coming in from the outer colonies. The Zygrax had begun amassing their forces again, preparing for a second assault. This time, they would come with everything they had. "The Zygrax are not finished," Yelena said, her voice steady. "They're gathering their forces, ready for a counterattack." Her team gathered around the table, their faces grim. Despite the success of the first strike, they knew that the real challenge had just begun. The Zygrax weren't going to stop until they had crushed humanity's resistance. "We have to hit them first," Yelena said, her fingers tapping on the holographic map before her. "We can't afford to wait for them to come to us. We need to take the fight to them while they're still regrouping." Admiral John Lentz, who had been overseeing the fleet's repairs, looked at the general. "General, we don't have the resources to go after them on our own. Our fleet is still recovering and we don't know where they've moved their forces." Yelena nodded. "That's why we need to act now before they can strengthen their position. We'll send a reconnaissance team to locate their main fleet and gather intel. Then we launch a surprise attack. We have the advantage of speed and stealth. Let's use that." The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. The plan was risky. There were many unknowns, but if humanity didn't act now, they might never get another chance. "Do it," Lentz said after a pause, his voice resolute. "We'll support you however we can." Meanwhile, aboard the Victory, Captain Marcus Flynn was preparing his ship for the mission. He stood in front of the crew, the atmosphere tense. The Victory had proven itself in battle, but this next mission was going to be different. The Zygrax would not let them catch them off guard again. "Listen up, everyone," Flynn began, his voice firm. "We've won the first round, but this is far from over. The Zygrax are regrouping, and they'll be coming for us harder than ever. We're going to need to move fast and hit them before they can strike back. We have a window of opportunity. Let's use it." The crew of the Victory stood at attention, their expressions focused. They had all seen the horrors of battle, and they knew the stakes. The survival of humanity was on the line. "We'll be sending out a smaller fleet to scout their position," Flynn continued. "We'll gather intel, find their weaknesses, and then strike. No mercy. We are humanity, and we will fight back with everything we have." Rachel Thorne, the young fighter pilot who had proven herself in the last battle, was ready for the mission. She had trained her entire life for moments like this, and she wouldn't back down now. She suited up in her pilot's gear and joined her fellow pilots in the hangar bay of the Victory. As she climbed into her cockpit, her hands were steady. The engine hummed to life as the ship powered up, and she locked her helmet into place. The mission ahead was dangerous, but Rachel wasn't afraid. This was her chance to prove herself, to show that she could make a difference in this war. "Rachel, you're with me," her commanding officer, Captain Thomas Riggs, said over the comms. "We're heading into the heart of Zygrax territory. Stay sharp and watch each other's backs." "Understood, Captain," Rachel replied. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her mind focused. She had to stay sharp. The Zygrax wouldn't give them any mercy, so they couldn't afford to make mistakes. The fleet, small but fast, launched from the Victory and streaked toward the outer reaches of the galaxy where the Zygrax were regrouping. Their mission was clear: find the enemy fleet, gather intelligence, and return to Earth before the Zygrax could react. Back on Earth, General Yelena monitored the situation from her command center. The reconnaissance mission was underway. The small fleet, including the Victory, had gone dark, using stealth technology to avoid detection by the Zygrax. The hours dragged on as Yelena waited for word from the field. She knew the risks, and the longer the mission went on, the more nervous she became. The Zygrax were not predictable. They were known for their speed and viciousness, and humanity's window of opportunity was shrinking. Then, the alert came through. "General, we have a signal," one of her officers called out. Yelena's eyes widened. "Where?" "Deep within Zygrax-controlled space. They've found the fleet." Yelena stood up, a sense of urgency filling her. "Prepare to launch the counterattack. We can't wait any longer." Captain Flynn's fleet had located the Zygrax, but the situation was worse than they expected. The Zygrax had reinforced their position, and the human reconnaissance team was now surrounded. The Zygrax ships, far larger and more heavily armed, were closing in on them quickly. "We've got to move now," Flynn shouted into the comms. "Break formation, get to the rendezvous point." The human fleet scattered, trying to evade the Zygrax. But the Zygrax were fast and their ships were closing in. Flynn's heart raced as he watched the Zygrax ships firing on his fleet. Rachel Thorne's ship was caught in the crossfire. Her weapon systems had taken a hit and her ship was losing power. The Zygrax were targeting her directly. "Hold on, Rachel," Captain Riggs shouted over the comms. "We're coming to help you." But the Zygrax were too quick. They fired another blast, striking Rachel's fighter. The shockwave sent her tumbling through space, her ship spinning out of control. Back at Earth's command center, General Yelena could only watch as the battle unfolded. She saw the Zygrax fleet closing in on the scattered human ships, their devastating firepower overwhelming the humans' defensive tactics. "Get our reinforcements ready. We're going to need them," Yelena ordered. The first wave of human ships was being driven back. The Zygrax had regrouped far faster than anticipated, and they were ready for the fight. It was clear. The first wave of the human counterattack had failed. But General Yelena knew that humanity had more to fight with than just their ships. They had their resilience, their will to survive. They would not stop here. As the battle raged, humanity was being tested in ways they never expected. They had landed their first major blow on the Zygrax, but now they were paying the price for their overconfidence. The Zygrax were formidable, and they had learned from their previous defeat. The next battle would be harder, but humanity would not give up. Rachel Thorne's ship was damaged, but she wasn't out of the fight. Her fighter came back online, and with grit in her eyes, she joined her fellow pilots in another strike. The human fleet may have been pushed back for now, but they would be back, stronger and more determined than ever. This part of the story focuses on the human fleet's counteroffensive against the Zygrax, highlighting the first signs of failure and the dangerous risks humanity faces in its struggle for survival. It also shows the resilience of characters like Captain Flynn and Rachel Thorne as they continue to fight despite the overwhelming odds. The battle is far from over, but humanity's determination remains unshaken.